I haven't given my kidneys a second thought until recently. A recent poor blood test indicated a problem with my kidney function. As a result, today on episode 125, Glen and I are speaking with the amazing Rick Johnson, MD, about all things kidney and more. This is Dr. Johnson's third time on the show, this time to drill down into how to keep our kidneys healthy and a related bit about how to avoid Alzheimer's. Declining kidney function is a normal feature of aging. Perhaps it is a driver of aging. And as I am trying to age as slowly as possible, I must keep my kidneys healthy. Do you even know how to take care of your kidneys? Do your blood tests show dropping eGFR year after year? Is your creatinine elevated? Is your blood pressure going up as you get older? Do you ever get dehydrated? Do you ever take ibuprofen? Oh yeah, this episode is for you and me both. Dr. Johnson is a practicing physician, clinical scientist, and a world expert on sugar and especially fructose and its role in health. His research has been largely supported by the National Institute of Health, the NIH, and he is one of the most cited scientists in his field and has published more than 750 papers and lectured in over 45 countries. All right, let's talk to Dr. Rick Johnson about keeping our kidneys healthy. Dr. Rick Johnson, welcome back to the Wise Athletes Podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be back.
Let's do it.
I think it's been about a year and a half since you were on, but this is your third time on the show. Thank you for being a friend to the Wise Athletes Podcast. I got to tell you, maybe I should say warn you, that I have high expectations of you.
I'm in trouble.
From both of the last episodes that we did, I made big changes to my lifestyle that I think have worked out really for the better. Although, maybe some of it is preventative and the bad things that would have happened didn't happen. And it's hard to give you full credit for what didn't happen, but
Exactly.
I will anyway. When you were on before, you were talking to us about the unholy connection between sugar and in particular fructose and gout and high blood pressure and kidney damage and insulin resistance. And so you know a lot about a lot of stuff. And so we're going to get into a lot of stuff today.
Scary.
I want to start with the kidney because that's your specialty, right?
That's my specialty.
Yeah, you're not just a researcher. You're not just a scientist. You're a kidney doctor. You treat patients.
Yes, I've been taking care of patients with kidney disease for many decades, and I'm also the founding editor of our main textbook in kidney disease. It's now in the 7th edition.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's worked out really well for you. Congratulations.
Well, thank
7
you.
editions.
Yeah.
Well, that's really good. Well, so, when I was preparing to chat with you, I was sort of looking up, I had sort of kidney function on the brain because I recently had a blood test and my eGFR was lower than it should have been. And I'm thinking, Dr. Johnson could tell me more about this. What's going on? And we can get back into that. But anyway, so I was looking at, leading causes of death. And the kidney's on there.
It's on the top 10, isn't it?
I think it's number 8.
Yeah.
And so maybe that's why it doesn't get as much press as like the heart does or the liver does.
Well, this is one thing where the kidney docs don't want to be in the top 10. So the higher it is, the closer to 1, the worse it is for us. We don't want that. And you don't want that either. But yeah, we're shooting to get out of the top 10.
Maybe you're saying that you're only number 8 because you guys have done such a good job. Okay. But what I was trying to say was that you kidney guys are just not getting the press that the heart and the liver, the metabolic guys are getting. And, and I was going to be funny and say, oh man, that must have been a bummer for you as a kidney doc. But your research kind of found out some, root causes of kidney problems that are also root causes of metabolic problems and heart problems and all those other things. So I think you've sort of raised the profile of the kidney all by yourself.
Well, thank you.
Okay. And so what I wanted to do here at first, we're going to get into a bunch of stuff here, but I want to start with the kidney. Until recently, I really didn't know much about it. The kidney's kind of boring. What is it doing anyway? I don't even know what it does. And so,
okay, well, let's have a brief story about the kidneys.
And I've got 2, and so if something goes wrong, I'm covered. What's the big deal?
Well, it is good to have 2 kidneys because you can give one away, and that's why kidney transplant is such a powerful thing because you can live with one kidney. So the first thing to know is that, it's great that we have two kidneys. It gives us more versatility, and we can help others. But anyway,
tell us what the kidney does.
Yeah, so the kidney filters the blood, right? The blood flows through the kidney. It gets about 25% of the cardiac output. So a lot of it.
What does that mean?
Well, a lot of blood is going through the kidney, and the kidney filters it and filters out the wastes. So every day we have metabolism and we're making energy, but we're getting waste. We have waste products that we have to get rid of, and we get rid of those waste products in the urine. And
how does the kidney know what to get rid of? Now, I actually know the answer to this, and so what I had heard was that there was no way for the kidney to figure out all the new stuff that it needs to get rid of. The food companies putting all kinds of things in our stuff. And so how could the kidney know about that? Yeah. And it actually is way smarter than that. Well, how does the kidney know?
Well, the kidney is pretty smart, but it can be tricked. And chemicals and drugs and toxins can get into the kidney and cause problems. Yeah. So it's not perfect, but the kidney is pretty good at cleaning the blood. And it does a number of other things too. But when you start getting kidney disease, it can become a problem because you start to build up these waste products. And so you start feeling weak, and
you build them up where?
In your blood. And so like if a person goes into kidney failure, typically they'll maintain their urine output till the very late stages. So the urine doesn't go away. And in fact, one of the early signs is that you have to pee more often. You're not peeing as much, but you're peeing more often.
But there's less waste in the pee?
That's right. It's not good pee. It's not getting rid of all the things you need. And so some of the early signs is that you have to get up at night a lot more than you used to.
Uh-oh.
And that can be a sign. But it could also mean that you were just drinking a little too much before you went to bed, So there's a lot of things where you can people can get worried because the symptoms initially are sort of bland. You're weak, you don't have as much energy. And then later in the course, you might start itching. You can get chest pain. You can get some confusion. But anyway, but when the kidneys fail, you start getting really sick. Your bones get weak. And so we don't want the kidneys to fail. And the two major causes of kidney failure are high blood pressure and diabetes. And so some of these big diseases that diabetes, obesity, and so forth, can be associated with kidney disease. So what's interesting is that when people start developing kidney disease, they don't have to be diabetic or hypertensive. There's an association with just this thing called metabolic syndrome, where if you're just overweight and you have high triglycerides in your blood and you have a little fatty liver and so forth, mildly elevated blood pressure, some of these individuals also are developing early kidney disease. And in fact, early kidney disease or very low grade, small, not severe kidney disease, very mild, is common in people with metabolic syndrome. So when and things like sugar, which can cause metabolic syndrome, if you give a lot of sugar to an animal, they'll develop some kidney damage too. So sugar is one of the things that can cause mild kidney disease. Another one is gout. If you have gout or high uric acid, that is associated with low-grade kidney disease too. So you can get kidney disease with metabolic syndrome. And then as we get older, the wise athletes we are, as we get older, just aging is associated with some decrease in kidney function. Interestingly, I did a study in animals, and I could block aging associated kidney disease if I blocked sugar metabolism. So I think that we're on a lot of high carb diets A lot of us are eating too much carbs. And in animals, the high carb diet can actually lead to some aging associated kidney disease. And you can block that if you reduce your carbs and sugar, at least in the animal.
That's really interesting. So there's something that is happening, some accumulating damage, I guess. I mean, I guess your body tries to repair your kidneys, I assume, when they get damaged. Just like everything else, the repairing doesn't work perfectly, and there's little damage that accumulates over time. And one of the ways you know it in a kidney, I'm reading between the lines here, so help me if I'm wrong, is that your eGFR is going down and your creatine or cystatin C is going up.
Yeah, you're talking about all the blood tests. So, so it's kind of interesting. So the kidneys, when they get injured, are continuously trying to repair themselves. If they get damaged a lot, will start showing up with positive blood tests. And the classic one is called creatinine.
Uh-huh.
And that will go up. When it goes up, it's bad.
Yeah.
And it means that your kidney function is declining.
Is that one of the things, is that one of the waste products that's not getting filtered out enough?
It is a product that's a waste product from muscle that we do get rid of every day. And so it does build up when the kidneys start to not work as well.
Okay.
But it's interestingly, there's another substance called creatine, not creatinine, but creatine. And this is a supplement that people will use to build their muscle. And if you're eating a lot of creatine, it can help the muscle for sure. But what's interesting is it will make the creatinine go up as well.
Okay.
Because some of the creatine gets converted to creatinine. But that is a false positive.
Right.
Because your kidney's not actually getting worse. It's just that you're taking a supplement that makes the blood test be higher than it should be. So like if you are, an athlete and you're taking creatine and you go in and someone says, oh, you've got kidney disease. And you go, why? Why do I have kidney disease? They say, well, your creatinine is 2 and normal is 1. And then you get scared. The first thing to do is to stop the creatine supplements and after a couple of weeks get retested and your creatinine should go back to normal.
There's another test they could do, right?
Yes. Yeah, cystatin C. There are a lot of other tests that people are using, but yes. So there are all these different tests that people can use to measure kidney function.
Because one of the things that was a problem for me, I think, I did the cystatin C and it came back normal and I'm good. It was muscle mass. It wasn't supplementation of creatine. It was, I have a high muscle mass.
Yeah, so if you have a higher muscle mass, that will also make your creatinine a little higher.
Yeah.
Because the creatinine reflects the muscle mass. So like I've taken care of NFL football players whose kidney function looks bad because their creatinine is like 2, but actually it's all from muscle.
Right.
And so then you measure the cystatin C or another test and you can show that. So you can have a high creatinine because you're taking creatine supplements and that you can have normal kidney function, or you may be very muscular and that can also give you a high creatinine. So there are these tricks. Likewise, if you have low muscle mass, your creatinine may be lower than normal.
Oh, and you may look like you have great kidney function, but you don't.
Like there was this study done years ago by a guy named Saulo Clar where they were looking at this malnourished tribe in Venezuela in the jungles. And, they were actually, a lot of them had kidney disease, bad kidney failure, but their creatinines were normal. But because they had such low muscle mass, it was artificially low. Their kidney function was worse than they thought. We now know that, the kidneys are actually kind of important. And if you have high blood pressure, you probably have something going on in your kidneys as well. One of the big discoveries in the last couple decades was that high blood pressure is really a kidney problem. And the kidneys when you have very high blood pressure, the kidneys are having trouble getting rid of salt in a lot of cases, not all cases, but in many situations where you have high blood pressure, the problem is that the kidney has a relative defect in handling salt. And that's why low salt diets can lower blood pressure, because they're reducing that salt exposure. Studies by a number of people have shown that even though the eGFR is normal, or the kidney function is normal, if you look in the kidneys, you'll see low-grade inflammation. And that inflammation is playing a role in keeping the kidneys making the kidneys hold on to salt. So the way to view the kidneys is, our kidneys are critical. They do a lot of very good things for us. As we get older, our kidney function tends to decline, but usually it's not significant. The only issue is, if it does decline, the most important thing is to adjust your medications for the kidney function. If it starts to decline a lot, it becomes a serious problem. And that's, when the kidney doctors jump in there, and there are medications we can give to help slow the kidney from getting worse. And there's medications that sometimes there's different kinds of kidney disease, and some require special treatments and so forth. But the most common causes of kidney disease are diabetes and high blood pressure. So if you have those two diseases, or one of those diseases, the most important rule is control that blood pressure, get your diabetes under good control. And if you have metabolic syndrome, cut back on sugar. Sugar is clearly the driver. It's a big driver of metabolic syndrome. And high glycemic carbs are too, like bread, rice, and potatoes. Cut back on those if you've got early kidney disease and metabolic syndrome, and that'll help you.
Okay. And is high blood pressure one of the markers of metabolic syndrome?
Yes. So elevations in blood pressure are early markers of metabolic syndrome. And then as metabolic syndrome worsens, you can develop frank hypertension, severe hypertension. So hypertension is part of that whole thing.
And we're going to get into some of that detail. But I wanted to talk about the kidney a little bit more, and just find out if I've got my blood pressure's going up, and it is probably related to my kidney function, and maybe my kidney markers are getting worse. Is there some way to make the kidney healthy again? Or is it kind of a one-way road where it's like prevention is everything, because you can't undo your mistakes?
Well, there are several things that can cause bad kidney trouble. And one is medication. So medicines like non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs like ibuprofen.
Yeah.
These are drugs that can hurt the kidney over time.
Oh.
So, review the medicines you're on, maybe look them up on Google or talk to your doctor. But the number one medicine that can cause kidney trouble are these things called non-steroidals, and they're over the counter. Ibuprofen, Advil. Don't take a lot of those. Aspirin's okay, Tylenol's okay, but the non-steroidals, if you take a lot of them, it's not good for the kidney. And if you have kidney disease, you've got to kind of avoid them.
Okay. Athletes tend to do that. I mean, there was a time in my life when I took a lot of them, and I
took care of an NFL football player, and they would have these buckets where the people would just grab some of these NSAIDs and take them, and he got into trouble from that. A second medicine are proton pump inhibitors like omeprazole and some of those over the counter. They can rarely cause kidney disease. So if you get developing kidney disease, stop that medicine if you can. Talk to your doctor about it. Those are the medicines.
We're talking about the athlete here.
Yes.
And so NSAIDs is clearly a part of the athletic world. I think that dehydration is an issue, as well as, people are not only just getting dehydrated, they're trying to hydrate with a lot of electrolytes. So talk about all of that.
Oh, yes. Let's talk about that. So the other two, diabetes and hypertension, you want to get your blood pressure under control. You want to get your blood sugar under control. But for the athlete, one of the most common causes of kidney disease is dehydration. And it's true for everybody, but it's especially true for people working outside, for people who are athletes, marathon runners, et cetera, et cetera. And so dehydration can injure the kidney. And we actually showed that you can get both acute injury to the kidney as well as chronic damage to the kidney with repeated heat stress and dehydration. And in fact, there's a kidney disease that's emerged in Central America in the sugarcane workers. And these poor guys are out there cutting cane all afternoon in the sun, and they're getting chronic kidney disease. And there have been 60,000 deaths down there.
Wow.
It's a big deal. Our group has been involved in investigations. It's been discussed in all the big journals and magazines, and we think that one of the more likely causes is heat stress and dehydration, and we can find evidence for that. There may be some toxins involved as well, and we can talk about that. But dehydration is really important.
Okay.
When you get dehydrated, in the old days, they used to just give water and salt tabs. Yeah. And a friend of mine who invented Gatorade, Bob Cade, was a kidney specialist in Florida, and I was the Cade professor. I was actually
No way.
I was his physician as well.
Wow.
He invented Gatorade because, the football players were collapsing in the hot Florida sun. They were getting severely dehydrated. And, originally one of the football player coaches came up to Cade while he was drinking coffee and said, "Hey, why are the football players, why don't they pee after when they go into a game?" And the issue was they were getting dehydrated. And when you get dehydrated, your kidneys shut down and you don't urinate. So Cade actually studied these guys, and they were losing liters of sweat in an afternoon. They could lose like 5 to 10 pounds, just by being out in the sun and sweating so hard.
I had coaches when I was doing football as a kid. They wouldn't let you drink water because they were toughening you.
Oh, that's bad. That's bad. So what happened was Cade found out that they were taking water in salt tabs.
Okay.
And he had just been at a medical conference, a few weeks before, where they talked about how to absorb salt in the gut. You need to have glucose present. And if you just take salt alone, you don't absorb it very much. But if you take salt with glucose, you can absorb the salt much more effectively. And so he goes, oh my gosh, these guys are going to need glucose with their salt and water. Plus, he started measuring, he put these big rubber gloves that go all the way up to the shoulder that you use to deliver a baby horse, a foal.
Okay.
And he had the football players wear them. And so they sweat in there, and then he would collect the sweat and measure it. And he figured out that they were losing not just salt, but they were losing potassium. They were losing a lot of other things.
In the sweat with all these other minerals.
In the sweat. And he noted that, you're burning fuel when you're out there working out, and you're burning that glucose. And some of the players had very low blood glucose levels. They were basically, they were fuel deprived.
They were bonking.
And so he developed his Gatorade, by mixing solutions that had glucose, salt, water, potassium. Initially, it didn't taste very good. And, they added lemons and all this other stuff to make it better. And then later on, when it became a popular drink, someone started to add fructose in it. Now,
that's very sweet.
Yes, to sweeten the Gatorade. And the fructose, a little fructose turns out to be a good thing if you're dehydrated, because what it does is the fructose actually helps accelerate the glucose absorption, and it actually increases the ability to burn energy and for the muscles to optimally work. So it turns out that a little bit of fructose with glucose, salt, and water is like the ideal. And drinks like G2, the lighter, the Gatorade that has the lower fructose content, those are very good drinks in the setting of dehydration.
You mean while you're exercising?
Yes, while you're exercising. Now, if you're drinking a lot of Gatorade, which has sugar in it, when you're not exercising, it's not something I recommend, but because we know that the sugar will build up and cause its own problems.
Yeah.
But when you're dehydrated, it's really important that you try to stay hydrated. Now, there is a complication that's been reported, particularly in marathon runners who overdrink. And especially if you're drinking a lot of water. Normally, I encourage a lot of water. I think everyone should drink 8 to 10 glasses of water a day. Good, Glenn. I see you're drinking water.
Yes.
And it really is healthy. It helps the kidneys. It's good for kidneys. It's good for the metabolic syndrome. But if you're running a marathon and you get behind so that you're a little dehydrated, you can stimulate a hormone that makes you hold on to water. And if you drink a lot of water really fast while you're trying to correct your dehydration, some people will get water intoxicated. And there have been a few deaths. Like there was a death in the Boston Marathon, I think probably 15 years ago, that was related to drinking too much water.
What is happening in the body when you have too much water?
It's called hyponatremia. And your blood has a certain salt concentration. And normally when you get dehydrated, you lose more water than salt. So your salt concentration is high. And if you drink water, you're supposed to bring it back down to normal. But in marathon runners in particular, if they get behind, they can drink so much water that instead of taking it back to normal, it goes from high to suddenly low. And if it drops too low, it makes the brain swell.
Oh.
And that's not good because what happens is you end up having coma or convulsions, seizures.
So the water is being absorbed out of the blood into the tissues, and so the brain swells.
Yeah.
Okay, let's avoid that.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, dehydration is a major issue. And day to day, I recommend everyone to drink 8 to 10 glasses of water. And we know that it's good to keep for the kidneys, but it's also good at, we can even show that it can help reduce fat in animals.
Drinking water?
Yeah, it's sort of an interesting story. I'll tell you the story.
Okay.
So fat is an energy source, and animals will become fat to survive during winter. So your bear will become fat in the winter and then it will hibernate. While it's hibernating, it doesn't eat or drink and it lives off its fat. And so the fat is sort of like a stored calories. It's like stored calories. So when we eat food, we're getting calories for energy. But if we get into a situation where there's no food, then we have to burn fat. So if you fast, for example, you're going to start burning the fat. And the burning of the fat is to provide the energy you need to survive when there's no food around. Well, interesting, when you burn fat, you also make water. And this is really interesting. It's called metabolic water. So fat turns out to be not only a source of calories, but a source of water. And a lot of animals use fat as a water source. So for example,
just like a camel?
Yeah, like the camel. It has a hump of fat on its back, which it can use to break down to provide calories or water if it needs it. And a lot of desert animals will have fat in their tails or on the hump. They don't want it on the body because then it will insulate and make them overheat, right?
Right.
So they have to have it ectopic fat. So it's like on the hump or on the neck or in the tail. Like there's a little jerboa, which is like a little mouse and has a big fat tail that it can use as a water source. And lemurs, there are these lemurs in Madagascar, and some of them hibernate. It's not true hibernation. It's called estivation. It's the same thing, but it's in the heat. And what happens is when it gets really hot and everything dries up, there's no water around. And they actually store the fat, go into a hollow in a tree, and then they'll burn the fat to provide not just calories, but water.
While they wait out the heat?
Yeah, where they weigh out. And when the bear is hibernating, it's getting water from the fat. So it turns out that when you get mildly dehydrated, not severely dehydrated, if you get mildly dehydrated, it actually stimulates processes to make you fat. The body wants to try to get a little fat if you get mildly dehydrated.
So if you're chronically getting dehydrated a little bit every day.
Yeah, if you're severely dehydrated, you're going to get nauseated, you're going to curl up, and you'll probably burn some fat for water, but that's not the way to burn fat because you don't want to get severely dehydrated.
And you hurt your kidneys.
Right. But if you get mildly dehydrated, you turn on the production of fat. And so what we did, and you know how you get mildly dehydrated?
How?
You eat a lot of salt. When you eat salt.
Salty pretzels.
Yes, okay. Salty pretzels, that makes you thirsty. And when you're thirsty, you're activating the process to put on fat. And it's a process to help you make fat so that you can produce water. So what we did is we did this experiment where we took animals and we gave them a salty food for months. And what happens is they end up eating more and they get really fat. And they get diabetic. But then we did another group where we gave them the same amount of salt, but we gave them water with it. And when we did that, we had to give it as a type of in the food. We put the water in the food, so it was like a gel. But when they ate that food, they did not raise their salt concentrations. They did not show dehydration, even though they were eating the salt, and they actually did not get as fat. And then we took fat animals and we put them on water, and we could reduce their obesity and improve their insulin resistance. And we were able to show how it worked.
So it wasn't a calorie thing, it was just a water volume thing.
Yeah, it relates to the serum salt concentration.
Wow.
So actually, if you want to kind of test yourself, if you want to know if you're dehydrated or not, and some people chronically are dehydrated, the first thing is look at the color of your urine. If your urine is bright yellow, you are dehydrated unless you're taking some kind of dye or something.
Vitamin B or something.
Yeah, that's one. Exactly. What is it? Riboflavin. One of them, maybe is it thiamine? No, it's not thiamine. But one of the vitamins will make your urine turn kind of yellow. A B vitamin. I think it might be riboflavin. But anyway, bottom line is if your urine should be clear or just slightly yellow. You probably don't want it to be just like water, but you want it to be just very, very light yellow tinged. If it's dark yellow, drink more fluid. That's a good rule. Yeah. Okay.
Now, sometimes in the morning when you wake up, you can have darker, I'm speaking about myself, obviously.
Yes.
Darker urine. Is that a sign that I was dehydrated and I was injuring my kidneys?
No, because during the night, the kidneys will concentrate a little bit so that you don't have to get up to pee.
Okay.
Yeah. But during the day, you clearly want to try to keep that urine nice and light.
Great.
Yeah. The other way you can do it is when you see your doctor, if they get a urine test, look at the specific gravity. The specific gravity should be low. It should be like under 1010. But if it's a high specific gravity, it means you're not drinking enough water. Another thing is to look at your serum sodium on your blood test.
Yeah.
Recently, it was noted that people who have a high serum sodium, which goes with being mildly dehydrated, not only are at risk for kidney disease, but they're at increased risk for heart disease, dementia, diabetes, all the bad things. So people who are not drinking enough water can get into trouble. And if you look at your serum sodium, it can even be in the upper normal range, and it's not good. So the normal serum sodium goes from like 136 to 144. And if your number is around 138 to 140, 141, you're in the good group. you'd like it to be like 140, 139, 138, maybe 141. If you're between 142 and 144, even though it's normal, you're at increased risk for developing all these complications and bad diseases. This was just came out from the National Institute of Health. It's not my work. It's the group there, but we actually identified the mechanism and basically just stay well hydrated. So that's probably one of the best things I can tell everyone to do as we get older. Just make sure you drink enough fluid.
That's a great tip.
And don't drink sugary beverages.
Okay, so regular sodas or fruit juice or sweet teas, these things, just it's like, doesn't matter if you really like it. It's killing you.
It is killing you.
Okay.
Yeah, we did a study, by the way, where we did a study in people where we gave salty soup. And when we gave salty soup to volunteers, their blood pressure went up within minutes. And then we gave the salty soup with water, and their blood pressure didn't go up, even though they ate the same amount of salt.
Wow.
So the problem of salt is that it raises the concentration of salt in your blood. That triggers this high blood pressure. It also triggers this thing to become fat, and it's sort of like a type of dehydration.
Got it. Something you mentioned to me last time, and I don't remember you saying it here, but I thought was really important, so I'm going to throw it out. This business of your blood pressure goes up, but then, of course, your kidneys work on it, and it comes back down. It gets rid of the salt, and the blood pressure comes back down. It's like, well, so what's the problem? Well, the problem is that when the blood pressure was up, problems were happening that accumulate over time. So the more times it goes up, even if it doesn't stay up, you're accumulating problems. Am I right about that?
You're 100% right about that.
Okay. So it's kind of like, people talk about, oh, I don't want blood sugar spikes. It's more than just I don't want high blood sugar all the time. I don't even want spikes in my blood sugar. What we're saying is, yeah, you don't want high salt in your blood all the time, of course, but you don't want spikes either, because that means you're dehydrated, and that's causing damage.
That's right. That's absolutely right. So when your blood pressure shoots up, it's causing a little bit of injury to the kidney, but then the kidney repairs. But if you're doing it a lot, you get into trouble. If you get dehydrated and your serum sodium goes up, that activates things that can cause a little bit of damage to the kidneys and elsewhere. So you're right. So that's why it's important to be ahead of the game. And like if you're going to play tennis, drink a glass of water before you go out in the court,
Awesome. Not a gallon.
Not a gallon.
You don't want a swollen brain.
Did I say a gallon? I said a glass,
no, you didn't.
I think.
No, I was just saying, but don't drink a gallon of it. I actually one time was out doing a climb, and I can't remember what happened, but some catastrophe happened, and we ran out of water. And so we're coming back, me and my buddy Brian, and we're just dying. We've been out of water for like 7 hours, and we're just dying. We could barely make it. And I said, I'm drinking a gallon of water. And I went to the store on the way home, and I bought a gallon of water, and I drank half of it. And then I felt like I was going to puke for an hour. So I never managed to kill myself.
Yeah, I don't think I would. Well, a quart would be okay. Yeah, you didn't kill yourself. So yeah, you don't want to drink huge amounts, but drink a fair amount, then wait.
Yeah, don't get behind if you can't. But if you do get behind,
that's the trick. Don't get behind, because you could get that rebound problem.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So we're going to run out of time here, and we haven't talked about Alzheimer's or dementia yet. And so again, in that last episode that we did, where you were talking about these blood pressure spikes, and your kidney tries to protect itself, but it can't fully protect itself, and it accumulates damage over time. In fact, it's the repair of the kidney by the immune system that causes the inflammation, which makes it harder for the kidney to do its job. The same thing you said is happening at the blood-brain barrier. Is this related to this dementia thing?
Yeah, so blood pressure, chronic severe hypertension can cause a dementia too. There is this thing called vascular dementia, and there's a breakdown in the blood-brain barrier, and you can get a very low-grade injury with very high if your blood pressure goes up a lot, I mean, you can get this thing called vascular dementia. The one I was wanting to talk about more is Alzheimer's disease, which is a different type of dementia. But yeah, you can get vascular dementia from severe hypertension and vascular disease.
Okay, so tell us about this other way that you know about that contributes to the development of Alzheimer's.
Yeah, so just very briefly, Alzheimer's is now becoming one of the most common causes of death.
And it's a terrifying cause of death because we're not ourselves. We lose ourselves.
Yeah, it's like the worst because I mean, it's terrible for the person. It's terrible for the families. You basically lose who you are. It's a disease none of us want to get. And so the question is, why is it increasing? What can we do about it? And so when people study it, they see that the brain cells are dying and the brain shrinks. It's really a bad disease. And when they look in the brain, they see these things called plaques. And these plaques, for the last 50 years, people have thought that's got to be the cause.
Right.
And so there have been huge attempt to try to block those plaques or to try to treat those plaques. And you're right, they're called amyloid plaques. And at least 15 to 20 drugs went to, trial to try to see if they could get rid of those plaques and help people. Yeah. And a couple of them have just kind of a borderline effects and nothing great. It's obviously in the big picture, it's a failure.
Yeah.
So the question is, what next? So then,
if it's not the plaques, then what is it?
Yeah. So when you look at people with Alzheimer's, when it's really bad and the brain is shrunk, it's kind of late in the game. So what they want to do is to try to look at it when people are just beginning to have memory trouble and what's going on at that stage, because maybe that's the time to best treat it, to be most effective. And when they looked there, they found three things. They found that there was a problem of the brain cells to make energy, what we call ATP.
Yeah.
And that's because the mitochondria, which make ATP, weren't working very well. And the second thing was there was a problem getting fuel into the brain cells. There was a thing, the brain was becoming what we call insulin resistant, and there was problems with glucose, the fuel getting in.
Okay.
So you got a problem with fuel and you got a problem with energy, and that's associated with the third problem, which was inflammation. And that triad seems to be what is developing in the brains before people get the frank dementia. So then the question is, okay, well, that's great. What are we going to do? So a lot of people are trying to treat the insulin resistance. People are giving intranasal insulin. There's people trying to improve the mitochondria and block inflammation. There are all these trials, but no one is really looking at the direct cause. And so this last year, our group, along with David Perlmutter, who you probably know, a very famous neurologist,
Sure.
Dale Bredesen, a very famous neurologist who's been one of the first to reverse Alzheimer's. We got together and we looked at the evidence that sugar might be involved in Alzheimer's. And what we found was this. We found first that sugar intake, as well as intake of high glycemic carbs like rice, potatoes, the high carb diets are associated with increased risk for Alzheimer's. So we knew that.
So like people who eat those kinds of diets tend to have higher incidence.
You're right. It doesn't mean you shouldn't ever eat sugar, but if you're eating sugar every day, you're going into the high risk group. Okay. You don't want to do it. If you drink 2 soft drinks a day, the chances your brain's going to shrink is higher than if you don't. Okay. That's definitely shown. Then the second problem is if you give soft drinks to rats, they can't get through a maze after about 2 weeks. They have trouble cognitively. You can actually test rats, mental function by seeing how long it takes them to get through a maze. Normally, A rat will take a long time, but the second time it will get through a little faster, and the third time it will get faster, and it learns. It can learn. But if you give it sugar, that learning's gone.
Wow.
It's going to be the same. It's going to take that same long time every time. And so and then if you look in the brains of a rat that's been fed sugar, you find three things. You find that low energy, you find that inflammation, and you find that insulin resistance, the same three things. And then our group, has shown that it's the fructose component of sugar that does this. And you can make fructose in your body from glycemic carbs like bread, rice. And when your blood glucose goes up, you start making fructose.
So with these spikes that we were talking about earlier, your body will get rid of some of it by converting it?
Yes. So when you eat a pizza or a hamburger, especially the bun, okay, and your blood glucose is sitting there at 100, which is beautiful, and 1 hour after you eat it, your blood glucose is 160. If you carry like a continuous glucose monitor, you can see that. And that can happen in a normal person who eats a big meal with pizza and bun, hamburger and French fries. Suddenly your glucose goes up to 150 and you are making fructose in the brain. And that fructose in the brain turns out to be what causes those three things. We believe we have good evidence for it. And people with Alzheimer's have high fructose in their brain, high fructose levels, 5 to 6-fold higher than others.
Wow.
And so we think that this is, driving the dementia. And so what I would recommend, as we get older and you're worried about, what's coming, and you do not want to get dementia, just cut back the sugar, cut down on the soft drinks, and cut down on the high glycemic carbs. There's 4 big ones, right? There's bread, rice, potatoes, and cereal. Those are the big 4. Pasta a little bit, but the big 4 are bread, rice, potatoes, and cereal. And if you put salt on it, it makes it faster.
Makes it worse?
Yes, it stimulates it.
So like salty crackers?
Yeah, if you have a plain baked potato, which tastes good, but it tastes much better with salt. Beware, the salt will speed the production of fructose. It's better to try not to salt those things. If you could eat French fries without salt, but it's very hard. But even there, it's still not good. It's just the salt makes it worse. So, bottom line is, I think Alzheimer's should be preventable. And stay hydrated. Don't eat so much salt. Don't eat much sugar. And try to reduce your carbs to some extent. Still eat a cake on your birthday, that's okay. Still eat, some bread every day, but just don't eat it by itself. If you eat the bread in the beginning of the meal, the glucose is going to go up. If you're going to eat a slice of bread, eat it in the middle of the meal so that the other food will slow the absorption of the bread so that the glucose won't go so high.
I see. So get some fiber and some fats and maybe proteins before the really high glycemic index carbs.
Yeah.
Okay. The one thing that we haven't talked much about, but since we're given a sort of a laundry list of things to do to stay healthy, and really not just for the kidney, but not even just metabolic health, but brain health even. We haven't talked about how to keep uric acid down. Uric acid seems like a bad player. I think maybe there's some dispute about whether it's just a marker of bad things. And I think you think that it's actually a causal agent.
Yeah, we have very good evidence that it can be causal. We have tons of data on it, but there is a controversy about it. But I think that if any of you want to, you can go to my website and can look at some of the papers and talks that I've given on it. But uric acid is a problem, and people with gout have a high frequency of of high blood pressure and obesity and diabetes. And we think that the uric acid is contributing to that. So keeping your uric acid down is a good move. There's some simple things that can do it.
Yeah.
One of them is to stay well hydrated. Drinking water can lower uric acid. That's, an easy one, right?
Yeah.
Vitamin C is a vitamin that actually lowers uric acid.
Awesome.
It's quite effective. 500 milligrams a day. It's healthy and
okay. So not mega doses, but just some every day.
500 milligrams a day, or maybe a gram, but don't go over that. Okay. And then there's supplements. There's this one that David Perlmutter sells called quercetin.
Uh-huh.
That actually can lower uric acid fairly well.
Yeah.
Another one is, look at the medications that you're on. Certain medications can raise uric acid, like thiazide diuretics. And, so if you're on a diuretic, talk to your doctor. Maybe he can give you a different medicine, and that can keep your uric acid lower. There are these new drugs called SGLT2 inhibitors that are being used to treat all kinds of diseases like diabetes and so forth. Yeah. And they help lower uric acid. So that's another one.
Awesome. Well, what about purines? You didn't mention those this time.
Yeah. I'll get there. I was just going to say this study came out where they looked at people at age 60 and they made a prediction of who was going to make it to 100. And then they followed it up 40 years later. So they actually were able to look at age 60. What's your risk? What's your likelihood you're going to make it to 100? And guess what? One of the best markers was a low uric acid is associated with living to 100. So keep that in mind.
That's in a normal blood panel, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, not in everyone's. It used to be, but it's not in everyone. You probably have to request it.
Okay.
And then there's certain foods that raise uric acid. And the big ones, of course, are sugar and fructose. That's fruit juice, Natural fruits are great. We've probably talked about this before. Natural fruits don't have much fructose. They have vitamin C. They have all these other things that are good, right? Yeah, fiber. But a lot of fruit juice that's concentrated in fructose, that raises uric acid. Alcohol raises uric acid, especially beer. Beer is really bad at raising uric acid. So if you can cut back on beer, and then certain foods that we call them purine-rich foods, but there aren't that many that really raise uric acid big time. The big ones are things like shellfish, which we love, like shrimp and crab and lobster. Thankfully, they're so expensive. None of us can eat it all the time. But if you did, you'd get into trouble. And certain,
what about sardines?
Sardines can do it. Fatty red meats can do it a little bit. I know that there's a big, in general, carnivore diets are pretty healthy. But a lot of red meat and processed meats, can raise uric acid. Yeah, gravy, bacon.
Yeah, all the good stuff.
All the good stuff. That's what Mark Twain said. If you want to get healthy, just don't eat anything that you like.
That's good. It tastes good.
It tastes good. If it tastes good, you got to spit it out. That's what Jack LaLanne said.
Well, the truth of the matter is that you learn to like what you're eating. So if you eat healthy after a while, that's what you'll like.
Yeah, there's some truth to that. Although if you just gave me a plain cracker with nothing on it, I probably would be bored to death. Probably wouldn't be good for me either.
Yeah. I don't know what to say about the plain cracker, but I'll tell you that as a kid, I hated vegetables, and now I love vegetables.
Yeah.
And how did that happen? Well, because I started eating them because I knew that they were good for me. Well, how did I know that? My mom told me that. So turned out she was right. But I kept eating them because I wanted to, please my mom, and I wanted to be a healthy person. And now I love them. So I'm telling you, that is how it works. Why? I don't know, but that's how it works. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that when I was young, I worked out on a farm one weekend and was so hungry, and I worked all day, and I hated sauerkraut, and and I sat down, and I asked for doubles of everything, and I had this big plate of food. I was about to eat it, and this woman comes out and says, "You must like sauerkraut." I go, "No, please, no, please." And she poured it all over the food. I couldn't eat it. And I still don't like sauerkraut, but I do like a lot of vegetables. But yeah, don't feed me sauerkraut.
We're going to run out of time here, Dr. Johnson. Let's just kind of run through the books that you've written, which are amazing. Tell us about your books.
Yeah, so my most recent book is Nature Wants Us to Be Fat, and that kind of gives an update of what's been going, of our research on what drives obesity, and it turns out that there's a lot of things that are good, and good foods and bad foods, of course. But this book kind of talks about our work, research that kind of linked fructose as being the main driver of obesity and metabolic syndrome. And it's not just the fructose we eat, but the fact that our bodies can make it. So that's the most recent book. The Fat Switch was one that was before that. I also have a website, drrichardjohnson.com, that you might want to check out, and has lots of tidbits in there. So thank you.
Great. And I have 2 other episodes with you, which are amazing. I'm going to put all of that and the past episodes in the show notes of this show, because people really, what you are saying is not just important. It's like easy advice to follow. There's nothing to it. Now, maybe if you're addicted to regular Cokes, then it could be hard, but it's going to save your life. So you really ought to do that. Dr. Johnson, thank you very much. This has been magnificent again. And now I know how to save my brain even. So, all right. You succeeded.
You bet. Thanks, buddy.
All right. You have a good night. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for joining our chat with Dr. Rick Johnson. You can find more information about Dr. Johnson and his contact info in the show notes.